Without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over, just as I did this morning, to Chris Hayes, and he's going to take a walk through FundServ with you.
Would you rather talk about trust companies? Let me paint a picture. In 1983, late 1982, I was a supervisor for the Bank of New York Transfer Agency, their mutual fund division. The growth in the industry at that time had happened so fast and so suddenly that for one particular mutual fund CUSIP, it was a money market CUSIP for a no-load family, actually it's still around, we needed 20 people just to open the new accounts we received in the mail, paper and check. The rush for growth was so great that our hiring criteria was the door is open, if you can get through it, you have a job. And that's exactly what it was. The first 20 people in the door had jobs. We had no time to train them because the mail was a-coming, and it was time-stamped, and auditors were looking at the mutual fund industry very heavily back then. There was a woman in our group who worked for 18 months, 10-hour days, Monday through Friday, we had our weekends off, who did nothing but take staples out of the application check, put a paper clip on it, and pass it back to the woman behind her. 18 months. Right? At the same time, and I didn't know this, the ICI and the NASD had created a task force to look at these types of problems. There was concern in the industry that with all the growth, that the industry was going to shut down on itself, that there were going to be errors made, there were going to be investments not made on time, which would cause a scandal. And since the mutual fund company was growing so fast, the mutual fund industry, they didn't want any scandals. Really no different than today. No industry wants scandals. The task force basically looked at several components within the mutual fund industry, primarily from a broker distribution, because that's where the greatest growth was coming from, and identified lack of standardization, a lack of centralization, and a lack of policy setting as far as settlement cycles. There were trades that were being settled, that's money got to the fund for investment, anywhere between 5 days and 45 days on what they were calling wired trades at the time. So there were some real problems in the industry. They went out to centralized agencies, vendor scum, such as NSCC. Got to keep it in the afternoon session and the morning session.
It's becoming a buzzword.
It's more than just a word, it's a concept. But they went to various clearing agencies, NSCC being one of them, and asked for ideas and asked for some type of relief. NSCC recommended what is currently known as FundServ. Also, part of that proposal identified the need for, after the trade was processed, the exchange of trade-related information or account-related information, which is what networking eventually became to be, we talked about this morning. FundServ, when it was first implemented in March of 1986, was a very simple system, built at a very low cost, and because of that, it didn't do a lot. It was a single batch system that allowed participants to send in one batch file, standard record layouts for their orders. It allowed fund companies on the following day and only on the following day to confirm those orders. There were limitations in the number of days transactions would reside on the system before they would be dropped. Today we call it deleted. Back then we called it dropped. Registrations could come in. Registrations were free form, basically. We talked about issues with the social code. I don't even believe there was a social code field on the original registrations. They were very weak transactions, but it was a starting point. NSCC made a low investment because we weren't sure if the mutual fund industry was going to embrace us. The two real benefits that FundServ currently provides and was intended to provide in 1986 are a central communication point, and that's each company communicating with FundServ for mutual fund business would only have one physical link to one entity, being SIAC actually, which is our facilities manager. So they're our computer box. So it eliminated the need to develop individual lines between each of the trading partners. Right there you see some cost savings. The second side of it was net settlement, something very new and interesting to the mutual fund industry, something the brokers had embraced years and years ago. The ability to take all of your business for all of your trading partners, net it down to one figure, and send that wire, actually we were sending checks back then, or receive a check, I'm going to keep using wire, from one entity. So again, you're eliminating the need to reconcile, the need to mail. You're also moving monies a lot faster in a controlled environment, so in a sense you're reducing risk. So in 1986, we had a limited platform with limited users. I joined the firm in September of 1986, and one of my jobs was to train new participants. I also did a management report to our senior management on the success of the application. I think my first week we were averaging 7 trades a day. We broke 25 trades a day after about 4 months, and we had a party. We broke 100 near the end of the year, and we had another party. And from that point on, and the guys who are here with me know, we don't have time to count anymore. So we're processing so many trades through the existing system. I think I used 75,000. I think that still holds average. So we're moving lots and lots of trades, a very successful application through a very growing business. In 1991, we had new players coming to our table, and we had our existing members asking us to process more through the system. We started looking at potentially building a separate application to support money market no-load transactions. As we did that, and we also looked at the needs of the load business, we realized there were too many similarities between the instruments, and it really wouldn't be cost-effective to deliver separate systems. It sort of, one throws out the idea of centralization and standardization if you're forcing industries to support different systems. So we engaged in what we called the FundServe rewrite. A lot of you were involved in what we eventually showed up as New FundServe. New FundServe sort of blew out the 1986 application of a very simple system, and we built, and I forgot to bring the words, but I always get this mixed up, a real-time, transaction-based, rule-based processing system that allowed each participant, to a certain degree, to tailor the way they wanted to process within the application, either the rules of the security or the needs of their business. We did that through relational database technology, through a member profile and a CUSA profile that gave the participants the right to make choices. It set certain parameters. Probably most key was the ability to have flexible settlement cycles. As we moved from a T5 to a T3 environment a few years ago, or a year ago, FundServe was the only application at NSCC that didn't have to have a major rewrite. We actually, this for those of you who know relational database, through a series of SQL commands, just went into the database, changed the parameters, and on the next day we were in a 3-day processing cycle. So we proved internally that the flexibility was already in the system. We've seen by the growth in business, the new participants coming to our table, that the application and its flexibility have been successful. What I want to do is just kind of walk down the processing capabilities, and I'm not really going to key on any of them unless there are questions. Obviously, the application can receive orders, as-of orders, regular orders, exchange orders, fund-originated as-of orders, and fudge-originated orders. All of these orders can be confirmed in the system. They can be confirmed microseconds after the system receives them. So in the event the mutual fund industry ever goes to real-time pricing, or for as-of transactions where prices are known, a fund complex could, in theory, send us a confirmation microseconds after they've received and processed the order. The correction capabilities in New FundServe, mostly due to this man, are extremely flexible. We have correction processing, again, from point and entry. So if a order comes into us at 9:01, the broker finds out at 9:02 there's an error, they can submit a correction to that order. They can do that right up until settlement date, even if the trade has been confirmed. There's also post-settlement correction, which allows trades that have been processed and settled, money is exchanged, to go through a series of transactions to allow the fund and the broker to get the right information on the client's statements. It's a complicated process to a simple problem. I made a mistake. So now you've got to go through, and depending on what the problem was, you've either got to move the shares into an error account, rebuild a correct account, just move the shares into the correct account, again, depending on what the type of error was. But the extended correction process in FundServe is very flexible. It's also very underutilized. So this may sound like a commercial. It is. If you're not doing extended corrections, we ask you to look at it and try to determine why you're not doing it. If it's because you don't understand it, Greg, raise your hand again. Call him, we'll set up the meeting, and we'll talk to you about it. Last, far from last, assuming the order is a purchase order, registration can be submitted to the system, and again, they can be submitted with the order, they can be submitted after the order, they can be submitted after settlement. The application will either route them to the fund on or after settlement date, or if the fund elects, again, through their CUSA profile, they can receive them as soon as the system receives them. Funds are always required to acknowledge them back, so there's always a control in place, indicating that they've either processed the registration, established an account, or they move shares into the customer account for subsequent purchases. So I've already talked about settlement. Obviously, what we do is we net down and we report twice a day for trades that are settling in same-day funds, and it's sort of a misnomer right now, next-day funds, which is really settlement -1 notification. We notify the parties of what their settlement obligations are, provide them summary trade detail, and that rolls into their entire net settlement, their entire book of business with the NSCC. So from the broker's point of view, all of your street business coming through NSCC, you're either sending a wire to us in today's environment, or we're sending a wire to your bank. So it simplifies, again, the wire flow, not only within the mutual fund industry, but across the securities processing industry. A couple of ancillary processes that exist in FundServe are underwriting and tenders, which allow mutual funds that are going through an initial public offering to establish that on the FundServe system. They can negotiate which brokers are allowed to participate. We'll take those transactions, we'll process them up through the system, but we'll maintain the settlement date for when the offering goes live. There's enough flexibility that if for a reason you don't know the settlement date or the settlement changes because you didn't get SEC approval, we can change it. No one has to resubmit trades. It just automatically recalculates the settlement date. And again, we roll that into a net settlement on the given day. Tender is just the flip side of that. When there's a standard redemption period or a redemption date, we can take redemptions. Again, we pass them on, but we don't ask for settlement until the intended redemption date. Probably most key to the system from a control point of view, and again, it's internal looking out, is the reminder process within FundServe. All transactions that pend in the system, when I say pend, that means they require another action in order to close. We issue reminders to both parties. So in the case of an order comes in, does not receive a confirmation, we issue reminders out, letting both parties know continually for 60 days. We're waiting for a confirmation, we're waiting for a confirmation. Well, I'm not gonna do all 60. We're waiting for a confirmation. But if we're running short, I can. But we do that throughout the trading processing cycle. So again, when a confirmation comes in, if it does require a release to settlement for certain types of liquidation, we'll remind both participants. If a registration has been submitted and not acknowledged, we'll remind both participants. It's sort of the policeman that exists in the system. If you're receiving reminders, you should be looking at them, building your pending tables against them, and double checking. We've seen, not so much anymore, I think that much better standardization within FundServe, but people resolve issues outside the system and they forget they have an obligation to the system as well, because items are pending and could potentially create settlement obligations that are no longer real. So we always ask participants, either when they're going into the system or when they're looking at it, look at the reminder process, understand how it works, and you should build a lot of your reactionary processes against the reminder files instead of your external controls or your internal controls. The only other thing that the system does, and I always call it self-cleaning, both the reminders drop off after 60 days, so we'll notify you that this transaction is gone. There's also a facility called retiring participants. So when a participant leaves the application, and again, they're not leaving the mutual fund business, maybe they are, but they're leaving the FundServe environment, the system notifies the participants of all those pending transactions that are no longer going to be live transactions within the system. It also supports if a fund merges, or really it's more on the broker side, two brokers merge and there's a surviving broker. We'll do the same thing. We'll notify you that broker A is no longer active, but broker B has taken over survivorship, and therefore you can continue to communicate with us for the trade life cycle with either the original broker or the new broker, depending on the sophistication of your system. FundServe works in about a 13-hour window. We're up at about 6 o'clock in the morning. We shut down officially at 9 o'clock at night, and there's a late batch going in at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry, at 11 p.m. Communications to the system. We talked about single batch. FundServe still supports that. It also supports multi-batch or multi-cycle, which allows participants to come in as many times during the day, the 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock windows, with batches of transactions. And again, it could be their orders, their registrations, rejects, confirmations. We also have interactive processing, which we call the Cadillac of communications. And that allows each participant, as transactions are made available within your system environment, your operational environment, to be sent to the application. Again, it's a real-time application, so those transactions are coming in, being processed. If the contra side is also interactive, they're getting the transaction immediately. So the ability then to confirm them immediately also exists within the system. Any questions?